G'day, HMR here. So, you've got no contact from that person in BPD, or hopefully some modicum of that, but more to the point, no contact's really needed. That means blocking them on everything, etc. Why? Because they treated you terribly. Because people with untreated BPD especially, but even people with significant treatment, still may not be able to have any kind of healthy, age-appropriate relationship. So why is it that people with BPD always think that they're the one? They treated you terribly. They often don't understand the impact they've had on you. It's not an excuse for it, though. But so why do people with BPD so often, after you do go non-contact, after you work through everything you have to work through just to get to that point of leaving a relationship, if in fact you weren't ghosted, or dealing with some of that to go no contact, no matter how the relationship ruptures? And that's what they do. They rupture these relationships with people with BPD. There's no explanation. There's no closure. It becomes this patchwork, piecemeal guessing game that is so painful for people. So, and blocks people's recovery because they're so focused on the borderline. So I'm here to try to help you to understand this stuff on different, areas and from different perspectives, so that maybe you can at least hear this message today. No matter where you are with this, no matter how much it hurts, and I feel for you if you're in a really painful place, as someone who is still in a relationship with someone with BPD, or you're an ex now, or you're on and off, but you're trying to work your way out of that relationship, or you've just been ghosted, you need to work with somebody, and I'm out here if you resonate with me, to stop the focus on research. I mean, it's good, but not over-focused on that. Because I've had people say, clients say to me, people in live stream say, but if I can't figure out if they're BPD, NPD, comorbid, or if this is just BPD, I'm not going to be able to heal till I know. Don't do that to yourself. Cognitive dissonance and all the other things going on is more than most people can handle for a time, and maybe even for a long time. So here's the thing. How is it that the person with BPD, after they ghost you, or they cut you off, or the relationship ruptures, and or if you leave, whatever, how come they still feel like they're, poor them, how come they still feel, poor me, like, look what you did to me, instead of like maybe realizing, why don't they realize what they've done to you? Well, this is at the core of what happens. And the fact, to people who have BPD, in 75%, it goes to the core of the way that people with BPD, what happened in their early childhood. And it goes to the core of the reality that BPD is a response to adverse childhood experience, is a result to massively insecure, nowhere near secure attachment. It's a result of interrupted attachment more often than not, that can form an unhealthy bond. It's not healthy at all with mother in the early stages of life. Or there can be the absence of attachment, the absence of a bond. This creates not only fear of abandonment, but fear of engulfment. So why do they feel like they're the ones that are so like, oh my God, you did all this to me, when they did all that to you? And they might have ghosted you on top of it, but if you leave them, and or however the relationship ruptures, as they all inevitably do, then how do they get to this point where when you go no contact, it's all your fault? And if only you'd done this, and if only you'd done that, or if you didn't say this, or you didn't do that, then they'd feel differently, and it would be okay somehow. And so why do they maintain this rather childish, childlike? It's an emotionally immature because of arrested emotional development. There is no self. They're seeking identity through others. Yes, they're experiencing a loss when a relationship ruptures, or and specifically when you get to no contact, both. But the thing is, they don't understand, they don't have they're dissociated from the pain of what happened to them in early childhood, emotional arrested development, they lack that sense of self. And I know I'm repeating that a lot, but it's so key to understanding all this. There just really isn't any consistent sense of self or self contained within people with BPD from which to keep track of all this stuff. So it doesn't excuse the way they treat you. But again, they're always going to feel like the one who got hurt. They're always going to feel like it's your fault. And what's key in what I just said? Feel like. Because they're awash with feelings all the time, most of which, the emotional dysregulation and or to dissociation and all these episodes they have, etc., they're not caused by people closest to them, a loved one, an ex, like partner at the time, or an ex-partner, or you going no contact, or being a favorite person, or any of all this stuff. This is inside of them already. And when they're triggered to emotional dysregulation, it can be all kinds of different things for various people with BPD, but the commonality is it's pain, it's overwhelming emotion, they don't know what it is, it's from the past, it's got to do with something why people with BPD really need to get into treatment to understand what's going on for them in these dysregulated dysregulated emotional states. But because they don't understand, because they're inundated with fear and more and pain, and they can't cope with any of it, or even if they've been to DBT and even if they've had some treatment, maybe they don't cope very effectively. They might cope a little bit better, but they still have to symptom manage all this. And what is all the symptom management about, or lack thereof? Well, the symptoms are all pointing to something that's already happened to them in early childhood: emotional arrested development and the loss of self. It is horrifically painful every time they re-experience that, but they don't understand that's what's happening. So much is being driven subconsciously, because it might be able to come up to consciousness, or it might be unconscious. Depends on the level where it's at inside of people with BPD, each person with BPD. But even when they gain some intellectual awareness, then they might say some things that make a little more sense at times, but doesn't mean they're going to behave better. Doesn't mean they can change what's driving their behavior. And what's driving their behavior also drives fear of abandonment, fear of engulfment, the approach avoidance conflict consistently, which within it and due to that, when they're in fear of engulfment, it's push away. When they're fear of abandonment, it's pull you closer. So it's push-pull. It's idealization to a point in the beginning, of course. But when it's fear of abandonment, it's going to be some modicum or something like re-idealization, but it's not really going to be idealization exactly. But they're going to be coming toward you, in a different frame of mind, and trying to be, friendly and or apologize, and they might even mean it, but they don't know what's driving this. So the behavior isn't going to change. They haven't changed. It takes years in therapy. So if you're being hoovered, be really careful about that, because you're just going to go around the same circle, and as I've said in other videos, the cycles just speed up of splitting. So in the idealization phase, for lack of a better way to put it, which really kind of doesn't keep coming back to where it was in the beginning at all, then that's when they have fear of abandonment, so they're trying to come back to you, and they're trying to pull you back close to them. The fear of engulfment is when they go to the devaluation split. So this isn't anything that you do to them, but their perception, misperception more to the point, is that you are the one to blame, because they're seeking identity through you. They don't know who they are, and so you become that object of the parent representation in idealization, or sort of like just a base mood state. Could be of a good parent or good parent never had, but in the devaluation and the emotional dysregulation, it's going to be that you're being seen only, perceived only by them, unbeknownst to people with BPD, as the object of their bad parent. And this is what's explained in Object Gradations, and I think it's one of the clearest ways to put it, actually. So people with BPD are always going to feel like you did to them what they did to you. And again, underscore feel like. And then the magical thinking of BPD kicks in, and so what they feel is what they believe is really real. And there's nothing anybody can do to change it except for like in years of therapy and in the process of what it actually takes to be able to change this and to find the lost self, to do all the things that have to be done for them to build a self from the emotional arrested development that happens at or around by the age of 2, more or less. So the thing is, they're always going to feel like it was your fault. They're always going to think that you did it. It's always about poor me for them. How could you treat me so badly? And they don't, in the split reality of it all, in devaluation, they do not, in even an idealization, people with BPD do not understand how they've impacted you. And more to the point, even though they have the capacity for empathy, they're too involved in their own maladaptive defenses about what they keep re-experiencing in emotional dysregulation, dissociation, and sometimes triggered age regression. Not always, and not always back to the age of 2. But so if you're still wondering, why is it that you're getting all the flack? And then if you get a Hoover, and if you do entertain a Hoover, and or you're still in contact, they're going to say some incredibly hurtful things to you, like on top of everything else. And you might continue to be shocked by that. But here's the thing, this is why no contact is so important, because you can continue to be shocked by them, I guess, but you're holding up your life, you're holding up your recovery, and you got one foot in the door, and or you got toes inside the door and a foot and a half outside the door. And just sit with yourself for a minute to think how much pain you're in. So follow the pain, your pain. Take care of yourself. Get to no contact. And then people feel, well, they feel bad, and you're holding the other person's feelings. And well, you know, that's what got you into the mess in the first place, right? That's what you still have to look at. That's what you still need to know more about yourself about. So just know, people with BPD are always going to feel, poor me, you did this to me, I didn't do it to you, what are you talking about? This is all your fault, which is so untrue, such a cognitive distortion. But even more so, it is embedded within them as all they know through the false self, a multi-layered, yes, they are called infantile narcissistic defense mechanisms, though it's not NPD, and they will forever, unless they get a tremendous amount of treatment, feel like they were the one that was treated so horribly, because maybe that's what happened to them in childhood. That's how they got to having this adverse childhood response known as BPD. So just know it's not your fault, and they're not your responsibility. And in any relationship type, that's really still the truth. So people have to try to move forward and start focusing on yourself and your own healing recovery journey. Like I said, if you resonate with me, I'm out here to help you with that. Family of origin work, self-differentiation, inner child healing, and there are other aspects of this for some people in the work too. But the bottom line is, they are not your responsibility. They are not your child in most relationship types. And if they're an adult child now and you're a parent and it's the 25%, well, you got to let go. And it's really, really hard. And some mothers choose to go no contact, some don't. It's very different. But in all other relationship types, you need to go no contact, because doing anything short of that keeps you engaged with what they might hoover you with. They don't all hoover. Many will hoover, many won't hoover. Sometimes you think you're past the point in which they'll hoover, and maybe you start to then focus on yourself more, but you haven't closed the door on all the various communication types that you need to block them. And then lo and behold, they show up a week later, 2 weeks later, 2 months later, 7 months later, a year and a half later, 3 years later. I have had clients who've been through this with different partners, like a series of partners with BPD, because they didn't stop dating and jumping into the next relationship to heal and to get into a process of therapy and help for what's really happening. So I'm not saying it's anyone's fault that they get into the relationship with a person with BPD, or even a narcissist for that matter. But there is something in your subconscious, you know, or your unconscious mind that you need to know, and past experience that you need to know much more about. But just know this one thing for sure. Yes, the borderline, the person with BPD will always feel like the one that was treated so horribly. Like, they'll always feel poor me. And that's coming from their past narrative of something that in many cases actually happened to them or was perceived to have happened to them, and it caused arrested emotional development. But what you need to know today is you have nothing to do with that. It's not your responsibility. You may still really care. You may still really love somebody. But when they've treated you horribly and they don't even get that, they can't even see that, they're busy with poor me, and they think that you've done everything to them because then you finally get to no contact. Please don't let that stop you. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel comfortable. There's never going to come a day when you're ready to go no contact. But after you go no contact, if you don't make that full no contact, in the case of many with BPD, not all, you're going to hear how they want, to seek revenge or what they're going to do to you, etc. Or they might beg, or they might plead, or they might just constantly, really have a way of inducing in you guilt, or like you're responsible for like whatever's befallen them now. Don't believe it. Don't buy it. Stop holding their feelings. Start getting in touch with your own, which is painful for many people, involving codependency, right? But guess what? That's your way forward. You have autonomy over what choices you make for yourself. You can't rescue, fix, or help that person with BPD. So when you go no contact, people say, well, how come when I go no contact, then people with BPD really act like I was the one who really hurt them, instead of the other way around? Well, you can only know that they're acting, thinking, or saying that if you don't block all avenues of contact. That's why that's so important. Hope this was helpful. Take care.